Welcome to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm your host, Pam Rader, and I have with me today the lovely Cynthia Moore. Now, Cynthia is an award-winning playwright and a performer who wrote and directed theater in the San Francisco Bay Area for over 20 years. She's a founding member of Otra Banda Company. She worked with the Blake Street Hawkeyes before leaving the theater to earn a master's degree in clinical psychology. She worked as a mental health counselor for 23 years with a particular focus on the connection between spirituality and trauma. That's right up my alley. I love that. And she's taught numerous workshops in creativity, writing from the heart, and more. And she is the author of a really interesting, fascinating, and entertaining book. What's the title of your book?
Dancing on
Love that.
Coals, a memoir of an overperformer.
Yes, an overperformer, not an overachiever, overperformer. I love that.
Overperformer, slight difference.
Yes. I noticed that distinction right away and I thought, oh, the theater and all of that. Okay, overperformer. So you have taken a life that was very, let's say you had the gift of many challenges.
Definitely.
And you have done something that few people are able to do, and that is to take all of those challenges and turn them into wisdom, embodied wisdom, and then to take that wisdom and use it as service to humanity. So right off the bat, I just want to say thank you for doing that. The world needs more people like you. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Pam. I feel really seen and understood by that introduction. Thank you.
Wonderful. So if you don't mind just giving a little synopsis of your journey, I think our listeners would love that.
Well, this book is about my journey towards wholeness and towards finding home in myself. And it was a pretty long, hard journey with some false turns and some crazy detours. And as you say, hopefully a little entertaining along the way. And I wanted to make fun of how lost we can get and how desperate we can get when we're striving to find something that we think is outside of us, which isn't actually outside of us at all. So the book is about my sort of flailing in an attempt to find home. I was sent away from home at 11 years old to a boarding school in Switzerland, where I didn't speak the language. The girls were all 4 years older than me, so I was very out of water. It was a traumatic episode that I tried to recover from by becoming as performative as I could. I went into the performance career looking for approval, affirmation, witnessing, trying to get and getting all of that from being in the theater, which was exciting and lively and fun and very interesting. But ultimately, it wasn't a match. Insides didn't match my outsides.
So you just became an actor everywhere in your life. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And there's a cost to that.
There is a cost to that. And I think this is a story that a lot of women can relate to because I do believe there is sort of a woman's path to power that is different from the man's path to power. And often the women may begin by trying to belong in a man's world or compete in a man's world or develop resources and gifts and skills that are more masculine, more extroverted, more left brain, more cerebral, some of those qualities, which is fine. But if there's a part of you that's missing, if there's a part of you that's underexpressed, I really advise listening to that part, going inside and figuring out how to bring out that part as well, which is, in my view, part of the women's path to power.
I love this that you're talking about the women's path to power because it's very similar to my own journey. I felt myself having to lean into my masculine energy to survive. And then it worked. And, we do more of what works. It works to a certain extent. And then there comes the reckoning, because anytime we suppress a part of ourselves or repress a part of ourselves, and for me, it was the feminine energy and the receptivity, there is a cost to that. And it's, your authenticity. I really had a great period of time in my life where I really didn't know who I was. And at 53, I'm still learning who I am. And finally embracing the wholeness in my life. And it's exciting. I feel like a teenager again at 53.
Yes. And I love that you're pointing to this period of time of not knowing who you were, because I think part of this woman's path to power is leaping into the unknown. right? When we cast off from the known shore, the familiar horizons, the familiar ground that we know, and we cast off without knowing where we're going, where we're going to end up, and what we're looking for. And often that is the time of magic and the time of divine inspiration, the time of guidance, when something comes in and says, what about going to school as a psychologist? It's like, what? So we get these glimmers of instruction along the way, especially when we're willing to take that leap.
Tell me about some leaps that you took.
Well, I think that was the biggest one. I was in the theater. It was working well for me. I was in a company of all men. We were getting great reviews. Mostly, though, we were known for our masculine qualities of high acrobatic, athletic activity. We were very physically trained. We were recognized for that. And I felt when I tried to go into a more nuanced feminine version of theater, writing more language of the interior rather than the exterior, it wasn't received as well as what we were recognized for our
Mhm.
pyrotechnics. And sort of the testosterone quality of our work was recognized. And I just felt mismatched. Some part of me went into despair and I said, I can't do this. I'm leaving. I quit the theater and I did not know who I was. To echo your phrase, I did not know who I was. In the book, I jokingly say I opened the yellow pages and found an ad for staplers, nailers, and tackers and told my best friend, I'm going to be a stapler, nailer, and tacker because I think I could do that. I didn't know what I was going to do with
Right.
myself. And then I said, all right, I'll try psychology. I went to school. I tried a class or two and fell in love. And then there was that flow, you hit a flow state where suddenly the path starts to flow. Everything starts to align. You start to feel that you're doing what you were called to do. And I do feel I was called to develop my sensibility as a therapist and being able to work with people and listen well and also work with the landscape of the psyche, which I had done in the theater, but this is a different kind of working with the landscape of the psyche.
Right. So you said a couple things there that I'd love to pull apart. Number one, you said, you were in some kind of despair. And I think that in my experience in teaching spirituality for 30 years, we have this idea in our society that to be in despair is a bad thing. But what I can see looking back is no thorns, no roses. The despair is like to me, the discomfort of the soul in the inauthentic state that we are sort of occupying. And it's sort of, I think of that there's a despair followed by often a restlessness. And that is the call to action and we almost have to, we have to first start to seek the truth, like what is true for me. And then we have to be willing to burn down our lives, like burn down everything we thought. And that is very scary for people to
Yes.
leave an old identity behind and then to take a leap into something new. What do you think it was about you that what helped you cultivate the courage to take that leap?
Well, I believe in the still small voice
Mhm.
within. I believe in intuition. I believe that we have these inklings of knowing that we don't quite know, and something nudges us to move off stage left or take a turn stage right. And we follow, if we're sensitive to ourselves, we follow that. And I love that, the discomfort of inauthenticity. I love how you phrase that. That's so beautiful because discomfort is a growing pain. And I'm with you on the fact that we have to learn how to be with discomfort. I think all of my work in therapy has come to that point of being with the discomfort and being able to tolerate the larger palette of all of our feelings, the despair, the sometimes agony, the grief, the joy. The more we can tolerate despair, the better we can tolerate joy.
Yeah.
And so that is really the reward. If we can tolerate the letting go of the identity, the burning down of the structure, there's a whole new there's a new set of resources that become available. Carl Jung said that the first half of life is about the ego defining its constructs. We get a house, we get a relationship, we get a job, we figure out our place in the world, and it's an ego externally driven set of constructs. And at midlife, there's a certain sense of failure or, oh my God, or what is this? And often a descent into despair. And then we begin to realign with our life from a soul perspective.
Mm.
And what he calls the transcendent function then begins to emerge, which is our connection with higher power or divine inspiration. And that's what I love. If we can open to that, then we really get some beautiful guidance.
That's Carl Jung taught that, but that's been being taught since the yogic times. It reminds me of the story of Vashtista, who is a sage who was called in to minister to the young prince Ram, who was in despair. And his parents he was, supposed to take over the kingdom, and he was in this terrible depression. And Vashtista spent, I'm very much truncating the story, but he spent a great deal of time with the prince and asked him many questions. And then when he was about to leave, the parents said, well, you didn't do anything. He's still, depressed. And he said, there's nothing wrong with him. Darkness has its teachings. And I think that
Yeah.
this is a really interesting thing, especially for women. You talk about the women's path. I think we are more molded to be pleasant and that it's unpleasant to be unhappy or in despair. And so we tend to push it aside, I think, a little more than men typically do. We try to be palatable. And so I think for a lot of women, it has to come to a breaking point, unfortunately, before we move forward. But the thing about the breaking point that I want to explore with you is for me in my life, anytime there's been a breaking point, I look and think, oh, that thing had to come apart to make space for this next evolution of me. And I'm so grateful that that I didn't cling too tightly to the old. And to me, that's the thing I'm learning as I get older, is to just, as things are coming apart, not to cling too tightly. My marriage just came apart after 19 years. My husband just decided he didn't want to be married anymore a few months ago. And I was like, what? Okay. And I've embraced the grief of things so much in my life. I was like, just, okay, bring it. Let me feel it. Let me just surrender to it.
You had a beautiful podcast about
Yeah.
heartbreak. I heard that. That was really beautifully
Well,
rendered.
thank you. But I want to ask you about, this is a long roundabout way of asking this, just to set the context, though, that I think there are a lot of women who feel ashamed to say, like, I don't have it together, or I'm suffering, or because I'm supposed to just be nice over here, and I'm supposed to take care of all of these things. What can people do to learn how to embrace discomfort? You talked about that being a big part of your practice. What are some things that people can do to learn how to be with discomfort in a way that is healing?
I believe very strongly that we need to learn how to navigate our nervous systems, and that we need to understand when our nervous system is activated or in a sense of what they call dysregulation. And to name that and say, I'll often ask my clients, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you in terms of anxiety or discomfort? And so they can learn to name, well, I'm at an 8. And what is the core belief or the false belief that's driving that state for you? I'm all alone, or I'm unloved, or there's often a belief embedded in that. And so working with our sort of habitual states of dysregulation and recognizing where we go and being able to question and work with navigating, how do we metabolize those? How do we turn those around? How do we begin to detach from those core stories that are creating discomfort from the inside in a not helpful way? Because I think there's different kinds of discomfort. The discomfort of a marriage falling apart, you can't walk away from that discomfort. You have to walk right through that fire. The discomfort of believing you're a bad person because your marriage fell apart, that's not a necessary
Right.
discomfort.
Yeah. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
Exactly. Exactly. So learning to recognize the difference is a huge skill. But I also wanted to talk about women being palatable, because that's such a great phrase, that we need to learn how to go against the cultural, the dominant paradigm of the culture, which is, we need to go against what people think of us and against what people even want for us and want from us, and learn how to say, no, I'm striking off in this direction. It's it's very difficult for women to do that typically.
I've been blessed to have, though I was raised in the 1970s and was heard all of the messaging that we do. I also have a very entrepreneurial couple of parents, and my father was very encouraging to me. He always said, "Go do whatever you want to do, and people won't like it, and they'll be mad, and they'll judge you, but it's just because they're jealous that you're doing stuff that they will never have the courage to do." And he planted that message in me at a very young age, and so I kind of lacked that the compliance.
Compliance.
I would just be like, I quit my job to start a yoga studio and everyone thought I was crazy, and I did a lot of things and I continue to do those things because I just think like, well, if not me, then who? And if somebody's got to go first and show that we can do these things. But I had to attach it to some form of service because if it was just
Yes.
about me, I would chicken out. But when it became about service to humanity, serving others, helping others, I felt like I had medicine. And if I didn't do it, then I was withholding medicine.
Yes.
So that
Beautiful.
attachment to something bigger than myself helped me kind of go against the grain, if you will, along with the messaging from my father. But most people don't have that kind of messaging growing up. They have the you should stay with the pension
Right.
and be good and suck it up. No one likes their job and all of that. That's the messaging.
What a beautiful message you got that you need to do what you need to do and people aren't going to
Yeah.
like it. That is such a good
Yeah.
message. Bless your father. That was a great message. And I do think that in my version of the Women's Path to Power, which I want to give Maureen Murdoch credit because she did the heroine's journey back in 1990, and this is my version is similar to that, but a bit different. But what it involves is trying to succeed in a man's world, realizing there's a misalignment, going into despair, finding the path, and then bringing your gifts back to the community. So the service piece is actually a part of that because once you find your gifts and you become who you were put on the planet to become, you bring that back in service. So I'm fully with you on
I
that.
wonder if that's because women are so empathetic and compassionate that we feel more compelled to move forward in service. I'm curious about that. I want to hear a little bit more about your journey. Now, you in your book talk about having alcoholic parents. Now, addiction has been very prevalent in my life as well. I have a son who was a fentanyl addict for almost 15 years, and he's clean and healthy and getting married this summer and beautiful. His father, his biological father, was also an addict who died. He drank himself to death in a hotel room. And so addiction has been very present in my life, and I do a lot of work with families and addiction. But I seldom get someone with your background who has been able to do what you have done, to be able to shed light on like what does it do to our little brains and our little nervous systems to grow up in that kind of dysfunction.
So much trauma and so much excellent writing about growing up in an alcoholic family. The Adult Children of Alcoholics list is an invaluable resource because we grow up hyper vigilant, constantly on alert, ready for emergency and disaster at every moment. I used to, in fact, sleep in the linen closet because I was so afraid of my stepfather's rage.
Whoa.
And thank God for the linen closet. It was my safe place. But we need a safe place when we're in an alcoholic family because there is no predictability. And as a child, we grow up to feel like we have to try to exert control over everyone's emotions around us because they were so out of control. And so that became part of why I jokingly call myself an overperformer because I was curating everyone's
Singing
experience
and
all the
dancing to
time.
make everything okay.
Exactly. So recognizing that and recognizing that that's a form of illusionary power that you're trying to exert and recognizing you can take a step back from that and detach from that system, that alcoholic system, and find your own truth. Because children of alcoholics are always reading everyone else's reality, reading their truth, trying to adjust to it, trying to accommodate it, trying to please it, and finding your own truth and saying, this is where I am. This is what I need. This is what I'm going to do now is so liberating in that circumstance. So for me, it took going back to school in therapy, becoming a therapist, having to do my own therapy, having to confront my own despair and grief and the losses that I had endured. And then I realized that whole business of being hyper reactive to others was not an authentic place for
I
me.
have so many coaching clients that come and they say, I'm an empath. And as soon as they say that, I'm like, it's a trauma response. You just learned how to read a room to survive. And the
Yes,
more that people need to control their environment, the more I wonder what happened that was so out of their control that drove that behavior.
ex-
And it's so lovely to be able to look at that with people, because sometimes people say I'm a control freak, but I'm just in my masculine energy, but they don't look at it with compassion. Like, that was your little self finding a way to survive in an environment, and it worked, and now it's not working. That's all.
exactly. And this is where I love one of my greatest teachings came from. I took up Buddhist meditation 30 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. But one of the great things that I have loved working with clients with is the idea of the little self and the bigger
Hmm.
self. And to have people, as you say, experience that little self that's so hypervigilant and so in need of control and so
Hmm.
panicky, and say, okay, that's your little self. And now can you step out of it and access your bigger self? What is your bigger self? Think about that whole situation. And that's so eye
Right?
opening for people.
I think that people have it that there's something wrong with them, and they don't want to confront or sit with that. But when we can give them a compassionate access to seeing it, they can soften around it. And only when there's softening can we heal. There
Right.
was a study that as you were talking, that popped into my mind. And when I was writing my memoir, I came across the study, and it was something like, and I say this loosely, they had a group of women that they put into a room for the day, where they had them hooked up to these electrodes that could measure their heart rate and electrical activity in their brain. And they would bang a gong every like 15 minutes and make rattling noises and alarms and everything. And then at the end of the day, they measured their heart rate and their nervous system activity. And for the first group, where the gong happened every 15 minutes, those women were able to go back to stasis within 24 hours. But there was a second group that it was just random, and they didn't ever know. And so they were in there for the same length of time, but the gong was random. The loud noises were random. Some of those women didn't return to stasis for months. So just a little snippet of how, like, living in a dysfunctional environment can impact our nervous system long term and have us living
Exactly.
in fight or flight. So what
Exactly.
are some of the things that you said, things like coming back to yourself? How does one come back to yourself?
Well, I think you have to learn how to experience that felt sense, the felt sense of your feelings, your emotional state, your physical presence, your grounding. It's a journey of knowing how you feel. And when you're struggling, when you're in that little self, to really be able to acknowledge it and say, this is my wounded place. This is my small self. This is the core belief. I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. To experience that, bring compassion to it and find a way to navigate so that you don't live in that identification state,
Right.
which is where the bigger self comes in so usefully, because you can say that's where you are in your wounded self. Now, if you have a larger place to step into, if there's a bigger self, if there's an awareness place that you can bring to that suffering, and this is where my work with spirituality and
Mhm.
trauma comes in, working with trauma from this place of the bigger self and bringing that wisdom body, or that, as Jung called it, the transcendent
Mhm.
function, to that suffering. And so I had to learn how to do that for myself. And meditation was invaluable for that. Learning
Beautiful.
how to sit with it, learning how to sit
I
in it, learning how to also feel that around that tiny, contracted, suffering part of me, there's a much wider field of love and awareness and grace.
I had a yoga teacher take me on a meditation journey once, that asked me to look at the first time that I felt anxious and needed to control things. And then he asked me to walk over to that child in my imagination and take her hand and say, it was really nice of you to protect me, but I'm going to drive from here. And then for me to have the courage to go and say the thing I needed to say or do the thing as an act of kindness and compassion to that little self, that it's my job now as the adult to protect her. And I have just kept that in my heart. And when I feel timid or not, maybe as not as courageous as I would hope I would be, I will think, if I don't do this, I'm letting her down.
Ah,
And so that's how I've integrated that into my life. And I found that very helpful. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. It came from a meditation and it just kind of evolved from there. But as you were speaking about it, I'm like, oh, well, that's that. Neat.
yes, so helpful. If we can have a felt sense of that bigger self, maybe even an image. A lot of my clients have images of a 10-foot tall Wonder Woman or a goddess or some archetypal form that they can feel in their bodies represents this powerful self, this bigger, this wiser self. Almost everyone, if I say, okay, let's access that place in you, can snap right into it. And then you can respond to the person who's triggering you or the person who's destabilizing you. You can come from that bigger self and say, well, wait a minute, let's go back and discuss this in another way because that's not working for me, whatever it is that you need to say.
Love that, like embodying the qualities. It's like borrowing strength from, or wisdom from. Like I have kind of a round table of people in my mind that if I'm not sure what to do, I'll think of what would this person say or do, and I'll try it on like a sweater. And I'm curious about this because you talk about how there's a link between theater and therapy, and I wonder if that's kind of, it's like trying on different aspects of personality traits and finding what empowers you, what serves you, what moves you towards your goals. Is that kind of what you see as the link?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. When you're in the theater, you're very fluid in terms of who your identity. And, as we know, spirituality is ultimately about dropping identity and being fluid. And so I may have started being fluid from a desperate place, a non enlightened place. But there was this sense of flow that you have to have when you're in the arts. You have to be really open to inspiration moving through you and open to what happens. And so that segued beautifully into therapy because you're also tuning into that flow state. You're also tuning into that non identified state. Because as the therapist, you're really the receptor. You're a coach, so you know this. You're the listener, you're sort of the archetypal listener and you're holding space for people. So that fluidity comes in incredibly useful, especially and also in terms of not being identified with this personality that we're embodying on this planet right now. This is not all there is. There's a whole lot more to me than what you see and what you hear.
Well, and our personality is just a reaction to our environment. It's a collection of habits that we've developed that work to keep us safe or win love. And until we unravel that and realize that we can recreate ourselves at any moment, then we're not free, you know? And I think this is the thing that's still unraveling for me. Every day I'm asking, what kind of mother do I want to be? What kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of community member? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And I get to create that as new each day
Yes.
rather than just dragging the past into the present and guaranteeing that that is my future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To be able to let go, let go, let go every day of who we think we are, what we think we need, what we think we think.
Yeah, I think that probably the three most powerful words in the English language are I don't know. I don't know who I am. I don't know what this is. I don't know. It puts us in this childlike wonder. And I think that that's when we're creative. And I love this connection with therapy and theater. There's a creativity, a creative force in becoming ourselves, isn't there?
Absolutely. And, I've taught a lot of classes for writers on writing classes. And the way that I teach people to access inspiration is to not know. You have to enter an "I don't know" state. You can't write from a left well, I mean, unless you're writing technical articles, you probably can write from a left brain state of research and data, but if you want inspiration, you have to drop into a complete "I don't know" state and be completely receptive to what comes.
Well, to be inspired is sort of, I think, like infused with, something that comes from higher than us, or maybe our higher selves. Maybe what if you believe in something bigger than yourself, the universe, God, creator. When we say we know something, we're limited to whatever this physical body has experienced. But when we say we don't know, now we're open to something higher than ourselves coming in to inform us.
Yes.
So, what moments of inspiration stick out to you in terms of like catalyzing the? It sounds like you have a really beautiful, full life, and you do a lot of things that you love to do. Tell me about some inspiration that's happened in your life.
Well, I'll tell you about the very first moment that I heard the voice inside of me give me instruction. And this was in a moment of trauma, actually, when I was 11 and I was in boarding school. And I kept thinking I was going to get my mother to bring me home. And so she would come and visit me at this school, and I would beg her, please take me home. I want to come home. I can't bear it here. I was so unhappy. And at one point, she said, cut this out, or I'm going to stop coming. And in that moment, I remember I write about this in my memoir. In that moment, I just shifted, something internally shifted from desperate trying to get her to see my point of view to letting go. And a voice in me said, let go. This is not about your mother.
Whoa, I just got goosebumps.
And I can remember it in my body to this day. And it was a mixture of sort of a slamming door, a boom, something shut down in me. That was part of what I had to do, but also something woke up in me.
Mm.
And it was this still small voice, or I call it jokingly in the book, the playground monitor. It's like a playground monitor that says, oh, watch out. Now you're getting too close to the edge.
Yeah. Wow. And so, how do you think that that shifted the trajectory of your life to go from, because you had it that your mom, some external action or circumstance or a person could come in and rescue you, and then you had to become just completely self-reliant.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it was a combination of a trauma response because I slammed shut and I became self-reliant, and it took me a long time to open up again.
Hmm.
At the same time, I felt like it was a message from spirit, that spirit came in and said, "I've got you. Don't keep going back to your mother." And I think that's often one of the gifts of trauma, don't you? That when you're growing up with trauma, very often people have a heightened relationship with spirit as a result of that.
Yeah, when I was born, I was 5 months old when my sister died. I had a 3-year-old sister. She died from the croup, and this is 1971. My parents didn't go to therapy. My dad went back to work, and my mom was like 22, and she's like a ghost in my house. So I became kind of a parent, and I was this weird kid. I would go hang out at the graveyard and talk to all the dead people and the spirits, and like I would go make myself a little picnic and go to the graveyard. Like what a weird kid, right? But it was
What a
because
coping
yeah,
mechanism.
I felt like really close to spirit and it didn't bother me. And I thought I could talk to all these people. And I mean, I think the veil is thinner and probably I could, but
Ah,
yeah, I think you're right. Like when there is some kind of trauma, that children have more access to spirit than we do.
access. And what you're describing is curiously like mine. It's part trauma, but also a brilliant coping mechanism.
Right.
That you're dealing with the trauma of your family, but dealing with it in a way that says, "I can handle this because I can connect with the other side, and it's not a terrible place to be."
Yeah. Yeah. I became quite a daydreamer and I would dream about spirit and all of that. And I think that's what's driven my work in spirituality for so many years and probably you as well.
Yes, I used to go talk to the fairies in the garden.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love
There were
that.
fairies in the garden, and they would tell me what to do and tell me where to go, but those moments of inspiration are so interesting because they come out of the blue, don't they? Sometimes you'll have a publishing this book, I had it around on my shelf for 10 years, and all of a sudden I got a message, "It's time to go publish this book."
Whoa.
And it was undeniable. It was a very clear message, and I think when those come through, and I think they come through more and more as we age, as we get older, and as we stay in alignment with our authenticity and our true self, those messages come through more and more clearly.
I wonder, I think we get good at what we practice. And for many people, women, everyone, we practice doubt. We hear those messages and we doubt them. And then we strengthen the doubt. We strengthen our attachment to fear, if you will. But I think that fear and faith are the same thing. They're both a belief in something that hasn't happened yet. And when you practice faith, in listening to those messages, and not just listening, but taking some new action, I look back and there's a track record of success when following those nudges.
Yes.
And then that builds the confidence to listen to them more.
Yes.
But we have to
Well,
start somewhere, right?
what's interesting is, well, first of all, I want to say that doubt is also cultural.
Mm,
It's ingrained in the culture that women should doubt themselves. I mean, look at our attempts to elect a female president. Women are not set up to be believed in or given authority in this country whatsoever. So doubt is part of our process. But the idea that you're bringing up about faith is so vivid because the word confidence actually means with
with
faith.
faith, yeah, confidant, yeah. Yeah. I've often talked about that as like to go with faith. It's like that is what confidence is. You just have to believe that something bigger, you're on the right, if you're in alignment with your true self, if you're in alignment with the highest good,
Yes.
then go forth and there's something bigger. What do they say, that the wind, something about the winds of grace.
I love the word grace because it really points to that there is some energy or some vitality that's in the universe that we can tap into. You could call it the Tao,
Yeah.
that really gives us the instruction that we need. And it's not ourself. It's not the performer, it's not the striver, it's not the hungry ghost, as they call it in Buddhism.
Yeah, yeah, the hungry ghost. Yes, always seeking more and more and more. You've studied Buddhism, you're a therapist, you've been in theater, you've done so many different things. What would you say is the number one tool that you would give to people who are feeling lost, feeling like they're off their path? What would be one thing that they could start with that would help them to move towards home?
What a great question. I would say that the number one, well, where we started was tolerating despair.
Mhm.
That is the first step, to be able to be in the despair and to have some trust that there is value in the darkness, and that our descent, or our dark night of the soul, if you will, as an instructive place. It's an informational place that says things are not right as they are. You are not in alignment. You are not congruent, your inside and your outside self. And so to come in with that, I don't know what to come in with a question. I love the idea of living with a question rather than looking for an answer. The question might be, show me the way, show me how to be myself. And then just being open to what shows up in your life, what shows up on your bookshelf, what shows up in your email thread. Answers will show up if you're receptive, if you're open, and to trust yourself. That would be my number one instruction, is to trust yourself, to trust that still small voice within you, that intuition, that inner guidance, to learn how to go inside and listen, to learn how to access your wisdom function by meditation or yoga or hypnosis or trance states. So many ways we can drop in and listen.
Okay, so where can people find you, Cynthia? Where can they get your book? How can they learn more about your incredible journey and gain some of your beautiful experience and wisdom?
My website is cynthiamorewrites.com, and they can go on there. I have another book on there, and they can email me at cynthiamorewrites@gmail.com, and they can get my book in any bookstore or on Amazon.
Amazing, amazing. I thank you so much for sharing your beautiful wisdom and I really honor your journey. I see you as just a beautifully grounded spiritual teacher. Being in your presence has been a great blessing. I feel very privileged to have had the opportunity to spend some time with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me and with our listeners. And yeah, keep doing the amazing work you're doing because I think the world needs more of that.
Thank you, Pam. You too. You're doing the good work too. So blessings to you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.